Introducing Docker. It can be hard to grasp what Docker is. This section will help you get to the point where you can explain it to others. We're going to understand at a high level what Docker is, see a container being run, and learn about features of Docker and what they mean for you as a web developer. Docker is many things to many people. For some, it's an application packager. For others, it's an easy and inexpensive way of provisioning a lightweight virtual machine. The central point is that Docker gives you any number of isolated environments on your host machine, which could itself be a Red Hat virtual machine, a Windows laptop, or an Ubuntu desktop. It doesn't matter to Docker. Each of these environments looks more or less like a separate virtual machine, or an isolated application environment if you prefer. This means that you end up with a system you can move from one machine to another, and it behaves pretty much the same. Let's get a feel for this by having me spin up a container, and we'll see it in action. You can also try this yourself in a browser by clicking on Try It on the Docker website. To spin up an Ubuntu container, I type docker run -t -i ubuntu /bin/bash. Notice how it's pulling down the image Ubuntu from somewhere. We'll discuss this more later. This may take longer for you. Notice also how fast it spun up once downloaded. There was no boot time or waiting for processes to start. Also notice that each container created has a unique ID associated with it. Note that there are no other processes than this bash one. Note also that I have root in this environment, so I can install anything I like or create privileged files within the container, like this. I can use this as a throwaway environment, and even make mistakes like deleting all my binaries, and just start afresh by exiting and rerunning the last command. When I'm finished, I can exit the container just like a shell. What we just saw was called a Linux container. A Linux container is a name for a group of features provided by the kernel for the isolation of processes, giving them their own network stack or file system, for example. The ability to have these contained environments is a consequence of some fundamental changes to the Linux kernel in recent years. In one way, Docker can be viewed as a nice user interface on top of that fundamental change, a bit like GitHub was for Git. Some of Docker's features worth being aware of include a layered file system. What this means for the developer is that it's easier and quicker to share images and changes to those images with others in development and production. It has enterprise support available from Docker themselves. Docker has the support of Microsoft, Red Hat and VMware, and a whole software ecosystem growing around it as we speak. It also has Docker Hub, which has a workflow for helping deploy and manage Docker builds. So what does this mean for the web developer? This gives us a much easier way to get code to live without worrying about local configuration and setup. All we need to do is ship the container to any system that runs Docker, and a lot of the work is done for us. So far we've learned what Docker is for, seen it in action, examined some features, and discussed how this affects us as web developers. We're well on the way to knowing what Docker is. So next, let's get Docker installed.